Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll be presenting 3 stories from Erowid, a forum board dedicated to drug experiences personally submitted by both first-time and experienced drug users around the world. Let's get straight into it. I am unable to accurately gauge the dosage consumed, as the ayahuasca tea was prepared in advance by our shaman. I had been traveling in Peru for a couple weeks and found myself in a small camp deep in the Amazon, 3 hours by boat outside the city of Iquitos. When we arrived at the base camp, I was blown away by how much life the rainforest had. While it was teeming with life everywhere, something about it made me feel uneasy and out of place. On the second night at the camp, a group of 5 other travelers and I will be participating in an ayahuasca ceremony. The ceremony took place that night in a small hut with our shaman, the spiritual guide. Inside the hut, we all sat cross-legged next to our buckets. Each person had a bucket for vomiting, as the purge is a common thing to experience when consuming ayahuasca. The shaman sat down with us and explained what we would be experiencing that night. He passed out the ayahuasca in the form of a bitter dark tea. We then drank, closed our eyes, and meditated on what we wanted to get out of the experience while we waited for the ceremony to begin. After 30 minutes, the first sign that things were starting to change occurred, with the floor rocking back and forth like a pirate ship. Panic and uneasiness began to strike me as I experienced this coming up. Sensing my nervousness, the shaman guided me out of that dark place by chanting and sending out his energy. At 45 minutes, I really started feeling the strong rush of the ayahuasca seeping into my consciousness. I signaled again to the shaman to guide me with his energy, and he came to my aid with more chanting. This put me at ease, though the feeling was still overwhelming. Soon after, the shaman began his ceremony. This included singing, humming, feathering noises, smoke, and aromas. He made his way around the group, blessing each individual person with a song. As my turn came up, I was feeling nervous and uncertain, as I had heard of other travelers experiencing shamans with malintent who turned out to be witches masquerading as spiritual healers. I did not know the shaman personally and was beginning to doubt his intentions, inducing paranoia. As it got closer to my turn to be blessed, my nervousness grew. It was my turn. My eyes were closed. As the chanting and blessing began, I intrinsically sensed that he had nothing but the best intentions to be our guide and healer. I began to embrace the experience instead of fight it. The only words that can describe what followed would be an intensely vivid trance. The singing of the shaman and the shaking of his feathers brought me into a waking dream. I looked to my side. I had wings, the wings of an eagle. As I was soaring, I felt a certain part of me break free and unchained from the limits of my own thinking. I saw that life does not operate on a grid. There is wiggle room in everything, and flexibility is needed to coexist as part of the universe. As I enjoyed soaring across visions of vivid mountains, lakes, and forest landscapes, the feeling increased. I knew at that point I would carry this unearthed feeling of freedom with me forever. During the trance, I also experienced visions of family, friends, significant others, and deceased family. I could appreciate their presence in a way I hadn't before. I knew that I had taken these people in my life for granted. I felt strong feelings of connectedness to family and a longing to appreciate those who are in my life. It was there I experienced that the world is connected by a universal theme of love. It's the energy of love that connects us to each other and the rest of the universe. Still chanting, the shaman's song seemed to melt into my soul. I appreciated it on a profound level, as if his song remained inside and became a part of me. I was reminded of an anaconda I had met earlier in the day. I was struck by how impressive this creature was, with its strong muscle and coils. He was the king of his domain, and I only a guest in his home. After 2.5 hours, the ceremony ended. I opened my eyes and the patterns on the blanket next to me were swirling like snakes. I walked outside to use the restroom and saw sparks of light and fireworks. They looked like bright fireflies darting around my periphery. In the restroom, there was an insect crawling on the wall. When I first arrived in the Amazon, I was a bit uneasy about all the insects around, but at that point, my perspective had completely changed. I felt a deeply euphoric connection to this insect and the universe itself. It made me smile and realize I was a guest in its home. The camp was very serene at this point, but still full of life. It struck me deeply how musical all the sounds of the Amazon were, with trees rustling, insects buzzing, and thunderclouds rumbling. I realized at that point that there is more to music than instruments. Music is everywhere in the world. The sound of life is inherently musical in itself. At 3.5 hours in, I was still feeling the effects, but had come down enough to interact more with my surroundings. I made my way back to the common area. Others were sitting on the deck, reflecting on their experiences. A guy sitting next to me was playing a wooden flute he had. It sounded beautiful and natural, in a way that recorded audio couldn't. We all talked about what we had experienced during the ceremony. Though the ceremony was a solitary experience, there was still a feeling of connectedness amongst everyone. We talked, sat in hammocks, and gave our thanks to the shaman, who nodded in an understanding way. All doubts of this individual had long drifted away, and what remained was a deep appreciation for what he had shared with us. At 4.5 hours, the others started to retire to bed. I sat out more as I noticed lightning and a thunderstorm off in the distance. It was calm and beautiful out, yet the Amazon was still buzzing and alive. I went back to my room to sleep, but decided I was not quite ready to end my journey because I had yet to purge. I knew this was an important part of the experience because it is said that the purge rinses us of all the toxins and negative energy that we have accumulated throughout our lives. I felt it coming soon. At 5 hours in, I had mostly come down, but the feeling of nausea I was told I'd experienced really started to creep in. I sat outside on some stairs with my bucket and knew it was time. I finally let it all go. The blackness that came out seemed to be all the dark and negative matter that collected in me during my life. It was rinsed out during this experience, leaving nothing but a fresh and clean state. It felt great to let it go. Once I was finished, I knew it was time for the experience to come to an end. I made my way back to bed and listened to music on my headphones as I gently drifted off. The next day was as peaceful as my experience the night before. The rest of the camp was drifting around, going about their morning. Our shaman was sitting in his usual hammock. "What did you think of my ceremony?" he said with a knowing grin. Still carrying the peaceful serenity of the experience the night before, I stripped down to my shorts and jumped into the Amazon River. This made the whole experience come full circle. With the journey complete, I knew I would take everything I had experienced with me for the rest of my life. The next 2 days involved exploring the Amazon. The subtle uneasiness I felt from being in the rainforest prior to the ceremony had completely melted away. I was much more calm and accepting of the place. I felt a deep connection to the rainforest's inhabitants. On the last day, I was leaving back to Iquitos. On the final leg of our journey, I had the opportunity to swim with one of the rainforest's elusive inhabitants, the pink dolphin. I swam next to pink and gray dolphins that relaxed leisurely around me. At no point was I more appreciative of the rainforest's acceptance of me and the experience I had in it. This report was written the day after my second ayahuasca experience. While the first one was quite uneventful, the second proved to be nothing less than astounding. My first ayahuasca experience involved some 50 grams of B-Cappy and approximately 12 grams of M. hostilis. A fellow traveler felt a considerable effect from this dose, while I only had a brief encounter with what I felt to be a female consciousness of great power, but nothing else. After looking through the literature, I decided that a more scientific approach was needed. In his bioassays, Ott established 1.5 to 2 milligrams per gram to be the minimum oral activity of harmaline, and the oral activity of DMT to be 0.25 to 0.5 milligrams per gram. According to Metzner, there are two distinctive types of B-Cappy. Judging from a picture in his book, I determined mine to be of the type called Tukanaka, reported to have a higher content of harmine, 5.5 milligrams per gram, than the other alkaloids present in B-Cappy. My weight being 68 kilograms, I decided that 136 milligrams of beta-carbolines from B-Cappy should be sufficient. Using Metzner's data, this should be obtained from 23.4 grams of B-Cappy, but to be sure I settled in the middle of Ott's recommendation of 30 to 60 grams, 45 grams. Choosing Ott's data on the DMT concentration of P. viridis, 1 to 2 milligrams per gram, making 17 to 34 or 34 to 68 grams of P. viridis the active dose. I again opted for the middle road, settling on 35 grams. For this second experiment, I crushed 45 grams of B-Cappy with a hammer and put it in a pot with 300 milliliters of tap water and a squeeze of lime juice. The fluid was filtered off and the plant matter was blended with 300 milliliters of water and lime juice. This was boiled for about 20 minutes and then strained. The combined liquid, 450 milliliters, was boiled down to 100 milliliters. The whole process took about 2 hours. Thus, I found myself sitting on some thick, comfortable sheepskins and a couple of pillows on the living room floor, staring at the 2 glasses of brown liquid before me. Recalling the gut-wrenching bitterness of the B-Cappy decoction, I prepared myself by numbing my taste buds with some lime juice and closing my nose with 2 fingers before drinking it. This worked surprisingly well. To my great relief, I tasted almost nothing. I waited 15 minutes before drinking the P. viridis brew. I closed my eyes and waited. I sat cross-legged, meditating until I felt the effect, which is the last entry in my notes. I lay down and started my submerge into unfamiliar territory. A lot happened during the next 2.5 hours. At first, my body felt heavy, kind of sedated, an effect of harmine, also noted by other researchers. My first contact with the DMT space consisted of a meeting with some space alien-like beings who brought me into a Geiger-esque universe. I have no memory of communicating with them, being probed, or anything else. The whole event was somewhat baffling and on the neutral side, although a little frightening as well. I asked for more, knowing I can handle it, and the experience accelerated. Gone were the aliens, and I was dissolving into a seemingly endless space of swirling colors, intricate patterns, filled with a loud whining noise, which filled my whole sensory apparatus. The patterns were much like the ones I see on psilocybin, but the colors less luminous. I decided to go out of my body, keeping my breath as a line back to life. During the journey through the DMT space, I witnessed some amazingly powerful processes. I felt that this space, which I assume is within all of us, is a rich source of energy and healing, spiritual powers. This realization was frightening, as I didn't feel ready to handle such powers, much less knowing what to do with them. I felt two very distinct tryptamine carrier waves rippling through my body. This phenomenon also occurs to me during my psilocybin trips. The waves come on as a loud metallic buzzing sound, which seems to signify that something is about to happen. And indeed, something did. As I was pulled deeper into the experience, the intensity of it rose to an almost unbearable level. At one point, I wished for it to stop, but knowing that resistance was futile, I recalled my reading of the psychedelic experience and let go. The DMT space was all there was. It filled my entire perceptual faculties, allowing no part of my everyday reality to interfere. An unquestionable plus. A quadruple plus. I noticed some rather severe nausea which connected me back to my body. It took me a while to accept vomiting as a feasible solution, owing to my limited body awareness. But when it came, it felt purifying and relieving. The vomiting concluded the very intense part of the trip. I relaxed and let the effect of the ayahuasca fade, while contemplating the unbelievable luck I am in to be granted a glimpse of these realms of vision, of beauty and energy. I felt that by doing so I connected with the ancient human tradition of entering these strange dimensions. I also felt that my having this experience was somehow beneficial for all of mankind, that I helped clean out some collective human karma. This was by far the most powerful psychedelic experience I have had so far, although the overall message was somewhat more blurry than those obtained by my psilocybin trips. I will return. I found a recipe online that was quoted to be the amount that the Peruvians use for a single dose of ayahuasca. It said about a 12-inch piece of vine of Banisteriopsis caapi and 50 fresh leaves of Psychotria viridis. I used half of this, and I recommend that you should too. More on that later. I whittled down a 6-inch piece of bee caapi with a utility knife and used about 30 dry leaves. I broke up the whittled piece of bee caapi with my hands until they were fairly fine fibers. I boiled everything at one time in a glass pot. Terence McKenna says that the aluminum of a pot can negatively affect the brew. I boiled everything, a rolling boil, for 1 hour, and then poured off the liquid into another bowl. Then added new distilled water and boiled it again. I did this for a total of 4 times until the liquid that I was pouring off was more of a clear yellow. I threw out the plant material, added up the liquids, and very slowly boiled down the liquid until I had about 200 milliliters of liquid that had the color of nice deep chocolate milk. I drank 100 milliliters. I've had 2 other experiences on ayahuasca before this. They were very nice and euphoric, with very organic, strange, geometric visuals. But this 3rd time I knew I did a better job preparing a stronger brew. But I did a much better job than I could ever imagine. But first, my recommendation to you, go very slow. I mean, certainly don't drink a lot your first time. Slowly, over time, build up the amounts you drink. Test your brew strength before you drink a big dose. I think you know what I mean, but let me tell you my story so you will become cautious and respectful of this drink, because I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I had to. I did not eat 4 hours before drinking. After an hour of drinking this bitter stuff, in an instant without warning, I was very panicked and very afraid. Terrified. My world was replaced with something else that was not here. Everything was too vibrant. Sounds did not sound right. It was very, very scary. I paced around, freaking out, trying not to be there, but I realized it was useless to try. This scared me even more. I ended up sitting on my bed, back against some pillows, drenched in sweat that I could not control. I was trying to relax. I was in this world for only a few minutes, but it seemed like forever. This place was the most frightening thing I have ever seen. This burst or glimpse faded into another world, into a lower world, distinctly different from the first, but not as fast, but almost as equally terrifying. Let me pause here for a moment. If you do this, I notice that people nearby, the apartments near me, experience something too, even though they didn't drink the brew. I did not like this at all. It made it much harder to deal with. I would have been much better off being somewhere that was miles and miles away from anyone, especially since my experience was so powerful for me. Okay, this lower realm scared me very much. I was teased by something. Basically, I wanted a big experience, and the answer I got was, okay, here you go. We will really give it to you. We will make you very frightened, and you will be humbled. Terrence McKenna put it in a good way. They, or the fairies, their idea of fun might not be your idea of fun. I was kind of laughed at. It was not fun for me at the time. At this point, I just wanted it to end, and I was trying to wait it out, but it took a very long time, almost 2 hours. I was trying to fight it off and calm down, but it was persistent on me. I was shown many things and taught. It was a very personal experience. After it was done, I thought, oh my God, I got through it. The day after, I was still very shaken up. After a few more days of thinking about it, I was very happy that I did it and got through it, even though it was deathly terrifying at the time. It's not that this place is a scary place, but I think we perceive it as being a very scary place indeed. I had many experiences during this time that go far beyond hallucinations and were far more real. I believe I caught a very small glimpse of what's really going on, and this small glimpse was quite a lot for my human mind to see. So, what have I seen to be what is really going on? I won't say. Most everyone would never believe me, nor would want to, because it's just too weird. But what's great is that our human minds are capable of seeing this truth. That's the fun part. Be safe and respectful of ayahuasca. I would recommend building up your levels slowly. That can make it much more confrontable. That can make it much more comfortable. You could drink a bunch, but it could really freak you out more than I could ever explain. You would get through it, but your experience can be very terrifying. Good luck. After this experience, I have learned enough to not have a desire to visit this place for a while. At a lower dose, you feel wonderfully euphoric and you can slowly enter something. For me, it was an extremely parallel. For me, it was an extremely real parallel dimension that is always with us, but we don't usually see it. And this place is very welcome of visitors. It's a mischievous place, but they welcome you. Good luck, and I wish you safe and comfortable choices.
Call Yanny if you want to call